1, 2. Hey, check 1, 2. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. If you could please take your seats, the program is about to resume. Hey, 1, 2. Hey, 1, 2. 1, 2. Hey, 1, 2. 1, 2. Ha. 2. Hey, 2, 2. Yep, and, but, yeah. 2, 2. 2, 2. Hey, yep. And, but.
right, let's get started. You got the mic on? You hear me in the back? Anybody in the back hear me? There we go. Okay. Welcome. Is live stream working? Video's working, audio's working, the live stream's working. This is a crazy production. It's been a crazy week. We planned this all out months ago. And then we did it again on Monday. And again on Tuesday. And again last night till about 1 o'clock in the morning. But we think we have it set. We're really looking forward to this. And I hope you are too. I got a bunch of announcements to make here at the beginning of the conference. The first thing I wanted to do is to thank my staff for this conference, both the hotel staff as well as my staff. They all put in a 16-hour day yesterday. We were up till midnight or 1 o'clock in the morning to get this all ready. And they've been absolutely amazing, absolutely amazing. So thank you guys. Our schedule this morning, I'm going to give the first talk. Sarah Catherine Gutierrez is going to give the second talk. Rick Ferry is going to give the third talk. We got about a 10-minute break between the first two, and we got our caffeine break. That's what we're calling them, the longer breaks. There's one each morning, one each afternoon during the conference. They're about a half hour. It's a chance if you need to run back to your room for something, that's a good opportunity to do it. The exhibitor area will be open during all of those breaks. We'll have drinks out during the caffeine break. That's the time you can go in there, get a drink, visit the sponsors, etc. Today, from 12:30 to 1:15, in here, we have an insurance panel. This was kind of an optional thing we added on later on, but it's going to be really good. I'm going to be moderating a panel with some of the insurance agents that are exhibitors here, and we're going to go over a bunch of insurance topics that we won't have another talk on in this whole conference. So I really wanted to make sure we hit that. That'll still give you 40 or 50 minutes to eat something before that talk, but it'll obviously be a shorter lunch break if you come to that talk. Make sure you get a chance during the conference to visit the sponsors. You should have a card in your swag bag. If you get a sticker from each of the sponsors, you get to enter it for a drawing for an iPad. And you know what? You got to be present to win, so your chances just went way up. For anybody that's watching this on the live stream, they're not going to be able to win that. And it's even easier because 5 exhibitors bailed out. So unfortunately, U.S. Bank and Origin Investing, Alpha Investing, CityVest, I think there was one other one that I forgot for a minute. But so you really only got to get 7 stickers instead of all 12. So it's an even easier task. So make sure you visit them at some point this week. Okay, as far as how to get your CME, here's the way it's going to work, okay? For those who are here live, you got to fill out in the last day, in the last sessions, you got to fill out the survey. It's a whitecoatinvestor.com/CME survey. Okay, that's a requirement. You got to fill out a CME survey in order to get credit. So fill that out and then come to the registration table before you leave anytime that last afternoon and get your certificate and take it home so we don't have to mail them out to everybody. So pick up that certificate if you want CME for the course. If you are a dentist, the way you get it is you go to embraceyourspace.com/WCI-2020. And that is in the app, as well as 2 pages of information on what you need to do to get your dental CE credit for the conference. The app is at cumulusapp.com. It'll ask you for a conference code. It's Whitecoat 2020. The W and the C are capitalized. Okay? Any questions on that, just ask staff throughout the event and we'll get you that information again. We're trying to keep everything in the app. The app was not up to date until late last night. It's now up to date. In general, the first thing I update anytime there's a schedule change is the actual conference page under whitecoatinvestor.com. If you go under WCI+, that's what we're trying to keep updated first. But obviously the last 72 hours have been nuts. But it's all up to date right now. The main changes to the schedule today are this afternoon. Leif Dahleen, the physician on fire, will be speaking instead of Dr. G. Jordan Grummett. And Stephen Podnos will be speaking instead of Randy Gertner. We have an evening event this evening. The Cerebral Tax Advisors dinner event is this evening. If you signed up for that, make sure you go to that. We have a book signing this afternoon. Those signing, I'll be signing my book. Rick Ferry will be signing his book, and Dennis Hirsch is going to come in and sign his book that's in your swag bag as well. So that will take place during the afternoon caffeine break as well as during the second session. So if you want a little more time to chat with the authors, after everyone else is back in here watching things, that might be a little bit better option. All right, so it's been a pretty extraordinary week. Not only have you lost 15% of your net worth or more, but it's pretty crazy news. Obviously, you all decided to come anyway, and I appreciate that. I especially appreciate that the staff came and that the speakers came, because without them, we wouldn't have a conference at all. But just because we came and decided to take a little bit more risk than those watching it on the live stream doesn't mean we shouldn't be cautious. So a few things to remember during this conference. It is a handshake-free conference. Use hand sanitizer frequently. Try not to touch your face. And we encourage a little bit of social distancing. The good news is with all the extra seats in here, that's a little bit easier. If you want to sit 5 seats away from somebody, you probably can find somewhere in here where you're able to do that. The nice thing about that is, if more people watch on the live stream, not only does it keep them safe, but it keeps each of you that much safer. So we believe it's a real high quality live stream going out today, so feel free to take advantage to that. If you want to reduce your risk even further, you can watch it from your hotel room and not even come down for every single session. I want to acknowledge those watching the live stream. Thank you for still participating in the conference. There are a lot of you watching on live stream based on my entire email box being filled last night with people saying thank you for putting that together. So I hope you enjoy that. There will also still be the e-course coming out in a couple of weeks. There will be another option to watch it. So you can watch it live, you can watch it from your hotel room or home, and you can watch it in a couple of weeks when you get it all put together. All right, I think I'm ready to start my talk. Let's go ahead and put my slides up there. A couple of things to begin with. This talk is eligible for CME and Dental CE, so there's no sponsor for this talk. I do have one disclosure about the talk. I will mention one person's name in there with whom I have a financial relationship. She'll also be your next speaker, so you'll get to know her well. All right, let's get going. Do I need to turn this clicker on somewhere? All right, advance. There we go. This is the State of Physician Wellness 2020, a review of the literature. That's my daughter and my son. We went down to Costa Rica and did a little bit of zip lining. And you wouldn't believe how fearless she was. She wants to go back over and over again. She tells us, I want to go zip lining, Dad. Okay, no problem at all. Mile or kilometer long zip line, 400 feet off the ground, and she was great. All right, our objectives for this talk, we're going to talk a little bit about sources of burnout. We're going to review the recent articles about wellness and burnout in the literature. We're going to examine the recent literature on financial literacy among physicians. We're going to demonstrate how financial planning can decrease burnout and improve patient care. No financial relationships with pharma or medical device manufacturers. It's interesting, when they ask you to give your disclosures, that's all they care about. They don't care that you have 250 financial relationships with other companies. But I'm not a licensed accountant, attorney, or financial advisor. I'm not actually licensed to do anything in the state of Nevada. So this is for your information and your entertainment only. I'm going to talk about statistics about you, those who came to the conference. We're going to review the latest articles on wellness and finance in the medical literature. And I'm going to present 12 principles that I want you to take home when you go from this conference. And they'll all be expanded on in later talks during the conference. But I wanted to give a basic framework for you to have when you go home. Before we get into your statistics, I wanted to put the typical physician statistics up here. This is a graph of what happens when you just ask physicians, what's your net worth? Everything you own minus everything you owe. And the one that concerns me is the one with the big red arrow. Over a quarter of docs in their 60s, after 30 years of physician-level paychecks, are still not millionaires. And I think that is a huge tragedy. You guys aren't quite like that. Mostly because most of you are in your 60s. As you can see, most of you are between 30 and about 50, with a fair number in their 50s as well. You're about 2/3 men, a little less than 2/3 men. 80% of you are married. Most of you are attending physicians, with a small slice of dentists there. That red slice is dentists. And your current household income, as you can see, varies from $200,000 to $300,000 there at the lower right, up to $300,000 to $400,000 on the lower left, to a pretty big chunk of $400,000 to $600,000 people, and then a good chunk between that and $1 million. So you guys have high incomes. You guys make a lot of money. But you're not that rich. This is your net worth. There's a few still negative, a bunch still in 6 figures. and then a little less than half of you are millionaires. But you all consider yourselves intermediate as far as investing knowledge goes. A few of you are not afraid to admit that you are a beginner. It's scary how little you know. And then there's a fair number of you as well that are intimidating to the speakers because you're going to find every error we make in our talks. And we welcome you here too. Most of you don't use a financial advisor. About 2/3 of you are just going to keep being do-it-yourselfers. But there's a fair number of you that are. Almost 1/4 of you use a financial advisor. And that's okay. In fact, I think about 80% of doctors need and want a financial advisor. But they're not generally the doctors who come to the White Coat Investor Conference. You guys read a fair number of financial books. Only very few of you have never read one. And over half of you have read over 5. Most of you consume some online content, either podcasts or blogs each week. It looks like most of you read about 2 to 4 blog posts or podcasts a week on finances. And you're all a little burned out. Some of you are really burned out, but less than 1/4 of you say you're not burned out at all. And so I think that is an important thing to realize, that we're tying the concepts of wellness and financial literacy together at this conference. And this is why. Because when you survey docs, a lot of them are burned out. And we'll talk about that in a lot of the talks during this conference. When I ask you why you came to the conference, and this is our challenge for this conference, right? I ask you, why'd you come? And most of you said, I want to learn more about personal finance and investing. But then I asked this question: how important was the provision of CME credit to your decision to attend? And 1/3 of you say you wouldn't have even come if there wasn't any credit. And almost all the rest of you say it was really nice to have. It really made it a lot easier to come. And so the difficult thing is you can't get CME credit or continuing CE credit for the stuff you want to learn at this conference. You get that from the wellness piece of it. And so I think the wellness piece is also very important because I think it all ties together. And so we try to keep enough of that in the conference that you're able to get credit for it and use your CME funds to attend while still getting you that critical financial information that you're really looking for. All right, here's my family. Here's my little 4-year-old again, canyoneering in southern Utah. I know some of you spent some time up in Zion over the last few days. This isn't in Zion, it's a different part of southern Utah. But she's our latest and greatest, so let's talk about the latest and the greatest in the physician financial literature. All right, we're going to go through a bunch of papers, and it's really cool because I did a similar talk 2 years ago where I went through all the papers, all 5 of them, and talked about them. Well, there's a lot more now, which is great to see. So let's start here. This one from Tevis et al. Is in the surgical literature. This is basically a survey of residents at a single program, surgical residents. And they said 38% of them had more than $200,000 in debt. 82% had a moderate to high high risk debt to asset ratio. But what was interesting about this paper is 79% of those residents felt strongly that the inclusion of additional financial training and residency education is a critical need. So there's a chance to show people that, yeah, we need this stuff in residency. Here is a similar survey done by Kevin Kuo. This was a paper or a abstract presented at the Pediatric Academic Society, and it shows the financial literacy of pediatric fellows. And what they found was they gave them this financial literacy test, and they scored a 35%. Yay, way to go. The problem is they gave it to the general population who scored 40%. Yeah, bad, huh? There it is. 77% were dissatisfied with their financial knowledge. At least they recognized it, right? 88% reported insufficient physician role models for personal finance. And 26% said they got some financial education while in medical training. 26% got it. 90% said it should be in our training. Okay, here's a poster at the Florida American Academy of Emergency Medicine Conference. This one is from Jay Proza. And this was a survey given to emergency medicine residents and internal medicine residents. They got a 56% on this one. That's pretty good, except the college students got 62%. So we're getting dumber about finances as we go through our training. Okay, this one from the Journal of the American College of Surgeons. This looks at the influence of student loan debt on general surgery, career, and lifestyle decisions. So they basically surveyed the residents and asked, is your debt affecting this decision? And 2/3 of them said their debt would influence their future job choice. 2/3 of them. And more than that said it's going to delay their ability to buy a home. But it's interesting, it didn't affect their decisions to get married or to have children. So I guess that's a good thing. The most important decisions aren't being affected by their debt, but it certainly is having a big influence on their lives. Okay, this one's from the OMFS folks. You guys may not know this, but the OMFS, oral maxillofacial surgeons, they have the worst debts in medicine and dentistry combined. On average, they have $300,000 to $350,000 debt. This is just student loan debts. And for those who go to the 6-year programs, like one of them I met last night, the average debt is $400,000 to $450,000. That's average, right? There's lots of people that have way more than that. Now you can see how people end up with $1 million in student loans. But it's a good thing they said they'd all choose OMS again as a career choice. So they apparently feel they can handle that much debt, which I think if they manage it well, they probably can. They usually have pretty good incomes. Jason Mizell, I don't know if he's here yet, but he will be here. There he is back there. Welcome, Jason. Nice paper. Jason's put together a course down at Arkansas called The Business of Medicine. It's given to 4th-year medical students. It's an optional course, and 90% of them come or something like that. It's pretty awesome. So he'll be on a panel later on during this conference. You'll be able to hear more about it. I just picked out the money slide, the money table from the paper. Basically, the course shows that fewer of them afterward anticipate having significant debt for the rest of their life, so they're more likely to get rid of their debt, and they feel more competent to manage their personal finances now and later. So I think that's a win, right? You can not only give them the information they really want, but you can show them that it's actually working. Okay, this is another one about a resident personal finance curriculum. They basically wanted to figure out what the residents wanted, what they had, and where they're at. I thought there were some interesting statistics in this one, so I wanted to highlight them. This is from Ryan McKillop et al. But it was interesting that 45% of the residents reported having a retirement account. I was really impressed with that. I think that's pretty good. And the average balance for a resident was $27,000. Wow, I thought that was really good. I didn't have $27,000 saved up for retirement when I left residency. I think I had about 10. So I thought that was pretty good. They were most comfortable with budgeting, least comfortable with disability insurance and home buying. They were most interested in retirement planning and investing in home buying, which I thought was pretty suspect. Because every time I go out and talk to residents, what they're most interested in is managing student loans. All right, this one comes from Ann Schachter. Ann, are you in here? I think she might be watching the live stream, but this is her paper. This is a nice one in the pathology literature, Archives of Pathology and Laboratory Medicine. This is a review article. It's basically personal finance for doctors. So it's a really nice review article. Good thing to take a look at. It's obviously, like most of this, not specific to pathology, right? But the idea is you can get this into every specialty's literature. Hopefully more docs will get a hold of it. Okay, this one's fun. Let's go to the other end of the careers now. Instead of talking to residents, let's ask the surgeons what their regrets are. If you ask them to reflect on their careers and ask what you would have done differently, you learn this. I wish I'd spent more time with my family and on my personal wellness. That's almost 1/4 of them. Now, given the lifestyle of surgeons, I think that's pretty good that it's only 1/4 of them. But that was their biggest regret. Also high on the list was joining a less stressful practice. And a fair number of them would have pursued a less demanding or better reimbursed surgical specialty or even a non-medical career. But I thought it was really interesting if you go down toward the bottom. Very few of them wish they'd been more humble or more collegial. And even fewer said, I wish I'd made more money. So that's interesting to ask retirees, and none of them wish they'd made more money. You know, despite the fact that 1/4 of doctors in their 60s aren't millionaires, that's a really small percentage that wish they'd made more money. Okay, here's a good one from the dermatology literature. This one was by Dr. Lundgren in Cutis, and this is a review article, basically personal finance for residents. it's nice to see it out there. This one is in current opinion in anesthesiology. I liked this one. It talked a lot about wellness, but I liked the fact that it focused on the two solutions, two categories of solutions, that it wasn't all focused on the individual. It also recognized that, there needs to be institutional changes too, because that's a big cause of it, is not the doctor's issue. It's the job's issue. It's the profession's issue. And I thought it was good that they recognized that. This article was in the Journal of Internal Medicine, Physician Burnout, Contributors, Consequences, and Solutions. I liked it for the same reason. In fact, they labeled on the left column, you see all the drivers of burnout. In the middle, you see a big long list of organization-level solutions, right, to fix the organization, because that's what's driving a lot of it, and a shorter list of individual-level solutions. I think it's important to recognize that there's a balance there, in how burnt-out docs are. So you got to work on both angles. Okay, this was an interesting one here, too. This is an editorial out of JAMA about a year and a half ago. And this guy talked about how, burnout's very prevalent in doctors, but it varies pretty significantly between specialties. He noted that female resident docs and those with higher levels of anxiety reported higher burnout. Noted that it was also associated with higher levels of regret at having chosen medicine. But also kind of argued this: if burnout is so variable in its prevalence, then either its measures are highly unreliable or seemingly similar populations differ widely in risk. Both explanations are worthy of study. He goes on to say there's clearly something important and worrisome happening to physician well-being. Speculations about its cause is a worthy place to start in developing hypotheses that could lead to solutions. However, the self-reported symptom of burnout, which is often based on one or two questions, has rapidly become an accepted marker for an epidemic of physician dissatisfaction and potential self-harm. The physician has become the patient, but the profession has started to act on the patient's symptom before there's any actual understanding of its pathophysiology, origins, consequences, and effective approaches. So his argument was that we put the cart before the horse. We really need to figure out what's going on and then tailor the solutions to what the actual problems are. And so he's encouraging less work on solutions and more on actually understanding what's going on. So I think that's an important article. It's come out in the last 2 years on wellness. All right, let's turn to the veterinary literature. Okay? If you think you got it bad as a physician or a dentist, you have no idea. In many ways, the veterinarians are the canaries in the coal mine. This was a simple article in the Journal of American Veterinary Medicine Association. Basically showed they're coming out making $85,000, owing about $150,000 on average. Here's another one, the Canadian Veterinary Journal, surprising new findings on their mental health and well-being. And this is interesting because their big stresses, or the big issues, were high student debt, as you might imagine with that income and that debt load, stress levels, and suicide rates. And their level of distress was very interesting, and this is one of the few places in the actual medical literature that documents this effect. So I think it's a really important finding. Those with no student debt, 3% of them were distressed, and those with student debt, it was over 3 times that high. I think that's a really significant finding because it demonstrates, yes, our finances are connected to our wellness. Only 41% of them would recommend a career in veterinary medicine to a family member or friends. And they also noted that female vets and younger vets had issues more frequently. Okay, Sarah's here. I saw her this morning. She's giving the next talk. Obviously, I have a financial relationship with Sarah. She advertises on my site. But she got a nice paper into the literature here with student loans. It's basically how to manage student loans as a doctor, right? Because there's a lot of people out there with some crazy ideas about what to do with student loans. But I thought this was the most important paragraph in the paper. It talks about, ideally, we're giving this information to borrowers during medical school because there's a big issue with the underutilization of public service loan forgiveness by people who would otherwise qualify for it. And when you combine that with low financial literacy among doctors, which we've already demonstrated with those studies at the beginning, that it really demonstrates that our current university-level education about student loans is totally ineffective, which I agree with. And so she argues that it makes it important that program and institutional leaders provide trainees with appropriate financial education, such as arranging for education from reputable financial experts. However, caution should be taken because many financial advisors are not aware of the details of educational debt management for physicians. That's unfortunately true. Okay, Journal of Surgical Education, whose problem is it? This was really fun because it shows a disconnect between the program directors and the residents. So they got 838 OBGYN residents, and 90% of them reported they or a colleague experienced some problem with wellness. But if you ask the program directors, only a third of them say anybody had any problems in the last 5 years. So a total disconnect there, right? The problems got worse as they went through residency. So it was worse as a senior resident than it was as an intern. The program directors, most of them said, yeah, we have some wellness program in place, but residents really didn't feel like that was super helpful for wellness. And so we're trying to do stuff, but it doesn't seem to be working very well. Okay, Thriving in Scrubs. This one was a qualitative study in reproductive health. They basically took 18 residents and they had semi-structured interviews with them and talked about how they could improve their resilience. And what they discovered was that there were 3 things that made a difference. One was connections within the medical community. One was finding personal fulfillment in the work. And the third one was developing self-care practices. All those seemed to enhance the residents' resilience. Okay, now we're going to get into the Julie Phillips show. So a couple of weeks ago, I didn't even know who Julie Phillips is, right? And I'm now going to go through 4 papers in the literature in the last 2 years that Julie and her colleagues have done. So this one was interviews with rural women family physicians. And they just did interviews with these 25 docs. And they discovered that these docs did to facilitate successful work-life balance. First, they used reduced or flexible work hours to help achieve balance with their personal roles. Second, they had supportive relationships with spouses, partners, parents, or other community members, which facilitated them being available to their patients. And third, they maintained clear boundaries around their work life, and that seemed to be the solution. So that got published in the Annals of Family Medicine. I thought that was really good. This one, another one from Dr. Phillips, specialty income and career decision-making. How much does your future income matter when you're choosing your specialty in med school? And what they found was that it really varied highly. A lot of students it didn't matter that much to, and others it mattered quite a bit. So basically the conclusion with this was that this is a lot more complex than anybody's given it credit for, which I'm not surprised. You all remember back to your decision. There's so many factors going into it. Too many of us didn't even think about income at all, but it's a complex decision because part of it is making sure you can stay in a career a long time because longevity matters so much. Okay, so these next 2 papers from her were really interesting where she got the data. She went to the American Board of Family Medicine exam, the registration questionnaire, and milked it for information, which I thought was really good. They did a secondary analysis on it and discovered that 90% of residents, family medicine residents, were looking for an employee job. They didn't want to go into practice for themselves, but that didn't seem to be associated with how much debt they had. What was associated with how much debt they had was whether they went to work for a government organization or if they had high or very high debt, they had lower odds of going into academics. So debt does affect people's careers. It's kind of interesting. You would think it might be a little opposite, right? If you had a really high debt, that you'd go into academics and get public service loan forgiveness, but it was just the opposite finding in this particular study. They're also less likely to go into geriatrics if they owed a lot of money. Okay, and this one, she went to the same source. It was, again, a secondary analysis of that registration questionnaire. And she discovered that residents with high debt levels and very high debt levels, and get this, performed worse on the test. If you owe a bunch of money, you're only half as likely to pass the family medicine boards. Wow, right? That's a big effect. Now, correlation is not causation, but I'd sure like to see more studies on that topic. I mean, imagine you can go to the medical schools and go, your students with big debt are doing crappy on the boards. Boy, that'd be a piece of information we could really change this system with. Okay, this one's interesting. This was in the Journal of Medical Education, just in 2019, March last year. They asked surgical residents, medicine residents, and radiology residents some questions. They said, how much do you work? How much do you sleep? How much do you walk during the day? And what they discovered is that the surgeons work the most. They're all over their duty hours, 84 hours a week on average. The medicine residents work 69. The radiology residents work 52. The surgeons slept the least, at under 6 hours. The other residents were just under 7 hours. And nearly 2/3 of participants scored high burnout scores on the Maslach depersonalization subscore. But it was interesting that the total hours worked and the amount of sleep you got and the number of steps you took per day, you know, they put pedometers on them, did not predict burnout or well-being. None of that was protective. You got more sleep, that didn't help. You worked less, that didn't help. The only thing they saw is that if you worked less, you did get more sleep, but that was about it. Okay, I threw this one in there. I don't know if this is technically the medical literature. This was in a throwaway journal in ENT Today. Sorry if the author's here, right? I hate to call people's stuff throwaway, but you know what they are, right? These ones that we actually read, and then you toss them. But this one was called What Physicians Need to Know About Investing Before Hiring a Financial Advisor. I think it was just worthwhile to demonstrate that it's way easier to get stuff on personal finance into the throwaways than it is into the official medical literature. So if you're interested in really getting out there and helping people, this is the stuff they read, number one. And number two, it's way easier to get the stuff in there if it's not a peer-reviewed, hardcore medical journal. Okay, this one was in my talk 2 years ago. I felt like I had to throw it back in because I knew both Fuad and Kathy was going to be here. Kathy's work put the kibosh on her coming, and so Fuad did make it again. So he gets his paper highlighted again. This again was a survey they gave to emergency medicine residents about their financial literacy. Yes, they all failed it. They got a 52% on average. And shows the need for the literacy education. Okay, this was an interesting paper because I felt a little bit singled out by it. It was in medical practice management. And I didn't see this when it came out in 2015. It wasn't in my last talk, so I thought I ought to throw it in. It's by a PhD. It's about empowering physicians with financial literacy. And I felt a little singled out, and I'll show you why. It talks about what residents should get, how they should get their financial education. And I actually agree with that. But they noted a few ways that were not ideal for residents to get their financial education, including blogs, and talks about the problems with the blog, right? I've seen very popular blogs providing incorrect advice, including blanket statements reflecting only superficial understanding. Well, you know what? If you wrote this in 2014 to submit it, there was only about 5 of us, right? There weren't very many physician financial bloggers out there. And so I'm curious which one was given the bad advice, but. And then, of course, a conflict of interest that is totally true, right? Finally, some successful bloggers have capitalized by accepting money from advertisers or providers of financial services. Well, in 2014, 2015, there was only one of us making any money at all, and that was me, of the physician financial bloggers. So I feel a little singled out. That is true, though, right? This is not the ideal way for doctors to get financial literacy, to come to my blog and read it. It is not the ideal way. It's a total stopgap measure. So what does this doc say we should do? Well, we should have 3 courses, one at the end of medical school, one at the end of residency, one at the end of fellowship. They should be 8 to 10 hours long, and they should be given by objective and expert instructors and be delivered in a classroom setting, and attendance should be mandatory. And then afterward, you should provide ongoing access to experts. I totally agree. That would be awesome. Then he concludes with this. The ideal framework just described may be difficult to launch initially. You think? Less ambitious implementations are better than nothing. Okay, fair enough. All right, this one is a letter to the editor in Mayo Clinical Proceedings. This one's really interesting because it's just looking at the burden of licensing, certification, and related credentialing among physicians and other healthcare providers. And here's the money table, okay? If you look on the left, you got the internal medicine docs and pediatric anesthesiologists, and they're spending $12,000 to $16,000 to get board certified and stay certified. And what is a nurse practitioner, PA, or CRNA spending? Well, $2,000. We're totally getting the doctor price, right? Okay, this one from Banerjee et al. This was interesting. This was not actually the medical literature, but I thought it was so interesting it was worth throwing in. This comes out of the financial planner literature. Basically showed that compared to the 1990s, in 2012, satisfaction in retirement used to be over 60%, and now it's under 50%. So I thought it was interesting. The retirees are much less satisfied than they used to be. And it notes 2 things which I think are noteworthy. First, if you're healthy in retirement, you're much more likely to be satisfied. But also, your net worth matters. You are more satisfied in retirement if you are wealthier in retirement. I mean, it seems obvious, right? But it's nice to see it actually quantified. Okay, this is a little bit older study. Somebody suggested I throw it in the talk. I think a lot of you have heard of this study because it's really pretty significant. It was in Lancet, and basically this is that study, if you'll recall, that shows if you will do exercise for 15 minutes a day, it lowers your risk of dying. Just 15 minutes a day lowers your risk of dying by 14%. So it's pretty significant. And you also had a 3-year longer life expectancy. The point is, you know, the high yield stuff is the very beginning of it. And so if you can get some exercise involved in your life, it really does make a big difference. If you add another 15 minutes on every day, every 15 minutes lowers your all-cause mortality by 4%. I mean, what other interventions do we have that do that, you know? They're few and far between. It even lowers your all-cancer mortality. If you will exercise, you're less likely to get cancer. Okay, it's only 1%, but still, it's significant. And it was prevalent in all age groups and all Texas. Okay, this one is a journal or an article in JAMA from Song et al. And I thought it was really interesting. This was not among doctors. They just looked at a workplace program where they went out and put a wellness program in place and wanted to see, is this going to work well? What will it do? You know, because the way you sell these to employers is that it's going to help the business, right? And the way you sell it to employees is that it's going to help them. And so they looked at all those factors, and let's see what they found. Well, they found that 18 months after their intervention, you know, they took half the employees and put them through this program, and half the employees they didn't. 18 months afterward, they were more likely to be exercising, which we saw that's good, right? They were more likely to be actively managing their weight. But then they looked at objective measures, and they discovered no differences in clinical markers like cholesterol, blood pressure, BMI, et cetera. And they didn't spend any less on health care. They weren't spending less on medications or on going to the doctor. And they really didn't help the business much. Absenteeism wasn't any different, job tenure wasn't any better, and job performance and productivity weren't any better. So unfortunate, but how do you know? Is it just that that program's got a problem? Doesn't mean necessarily all programs aren't going to help the business. This one from the Journal of the American College of Radiology called The Accidental Consequences of Student Debt. What are the accidental consequences, right? So that's really interesting. Well, a few of them that I could see in the study. One was for 2/3 of those with student debt, paying off the debt is a higher priority than retirement savings. I guess that's not terribly surprising, right? But they found that there's a 40% rate nationwide of people opting out of their 401ks, and that includes people who are leaving part of their salary on the table by not getting the match. And they thought those two things were related, that the fact that you have student debt makes you less likely to actually start saving for retirement. And it was also interesting here that they talked about some things that employers should be doing because this debt problem is such a big deal. And one was offering student loan debt repayment as an option in employment and retention practices. So if you're hiring doctors, consider putting this in as an option because it's really attractive to people right now. And then they even talked about academic medical centers being proactive in offering meaningful incentives to pay down debt as a means of attracting and retaining talented employees. So that was what they came up with as the accidental consequences. Okay, this is a letter to the editor in JAMA in 2017. It was interesting, I thought, because it talked about the mean debt in 1986, which in 2017 dollars was about 70 grand. So obviously it's much higher now. It's about 200,000 for MDs, closer to 250,000 for DOs, and like 260 or 270 for dentists. But what's really interesting about this study is they broke it down by specialty. Yeah, so it makes you wonder, well, who's the worst, who's the best, right? But the other interesting finding in this we'll get into was that the debt was concentrated. I'll talk about that as well. But first, the specialties, right? Who's the big losers? Emergency medicine. We are far more likely to have big debts. 33% of us have these big, huge debts. Family medicine and pediatrics were right in the middle. And the best ones were like dermatology and ophthalmology. We're much less likely to be in the highest quintile of debt. So I thought it was interesting to break it down and actually start looking at specialties and how it affects your specialty. But a couple of things here that were notable. I talked about the increasing concentration of debt. The actual percentage of medical students who are in debt is going down. Did you know that? It's going down. Fewer medical students are in debt than used to be. There's about 27% now that graduate debt-free. Yet the average debt is going up. So what does that mean? It's being concentrated in fewer individuals. And that concentration really is disguising the individual debt burden because we're all looking at the averages, when in reality we need to be paying attention to this group whose debt is really growing fast. It was also noteworthy that if you're in primary care, you had less of an increase in that percentage that has no debt. So the ones making the least also are being hurt by having the most debt. And so I agree with their conclusion. It's time to also be looking at the second order debt effects on doctors' lives. And obviously we have pretty sparse literature on this, but if you're a researcher, boy, that'd be a great place to start looking. Okay, another one from the veterinary literature. This was really interesting because they actually tried to put a financial literacy program in place for veterinary students. And there were 3 pieces to it. 1 was mandatory lectures, 2 was optional workshops, and 3 was the opportunity to meet with a financial planner. And the conclusion of the paper was that the meeting with the financial planner afterward was actually a critical component of a broader financial education program. So if you're putting one in place, you might want to consider figuring out a way to do that. There are several medical schools in the country that have a CFP on staff just to meet with medical students and I think the residents and attendings too. So you've actually got somebody that's salaried at the school, costs you nothing to go in and talk to about your financial issues. Another one from the veterinary literature. This was a survey of practicing and non-practicing veterinarians, and I thought it was really interesting because the number one level of importance, they rate their issues, which ones are most important to you. Guess what the top one was? For 2/3 of them was high student debt levels. But look at the next 4. Stress levels, suicide rate, ability to retire comfortably, finding financially rewarding jobs. Right? The first 5 are all about what we're talking about at this conference, right? Wellness and financial literacy. All right, so this deserves more time than I can give it. This is the Journal of Wellness. I think I'm actually on some sort of advisory board for this journal, but I haven't been doing much. I've just been busy, unfortunately. Martin Hucker wrote this review in the first edition of this journal that came out last year. He did a really nice review of all the literature out there on wellness, a little bit like this talk that I did. And it's a really nice summary. If you're interested in this area, get a hold of this journal. If you want to publish in this area, these guys will take your paper. Okay, send it to the Journal of Wellness. It's a great place to get published on this topic. I wish I could go through all the papers in there. I just don't have time. Okay, this one's interesting. This was in JAMA Internal Medicine. Okay, this is the business case for investing in physician well-being. Right? Because this is how you got to make the case to the hospital or whatever your employer is. And they looked at 3 things, really, where you could make the business case. The first one was you could have decreased turnover of doctors. It's expensive to turn over doctors. It's expensive for us. It's expensive for the employer. And they found that among burned out docs, the turnover rate was double that of non-burned out docs. That's a lot of dollars, right? You can make a really big case for decreasing burnout by showing you'll have less turnover. The next section was on productivity. So if they were less burned out, they were more productive. Each 1-point increase in burnout on a 7-point scale was associated with a 30 to 50% likelihood in physicians reducing their professional work effort over the following 24 months, as assessed by payroll records. So a big difference in productivity. And finally, the most important part, the effects on quality, safety, and patient satisfaction. They linked burnout to the quality of care and noted there's other studies that have done it as well. But each 1-point increase in the emotional exhaustion or depersonalization domains on the burnout test correlated with a 3 to 10% increase in the likelihood of a physician reporting a major medical error in the past 3 months. You don't think burnout affects the care we're given? It absolutely does. Okay, this one from the emergency medicine literature. Burnout, dropout, suicide. Talks about physician loss in emergency medicine. Well, went backward. I thought this one was most interesting because of this chart. Talks about all the causes of burnout, including financial debt. So if you got financial debt, it's definitely contributing to your burnout. So you got to address it. Along with all kinds of things like second victim syndrome, which Dr. Ahmad will be talking about. The EMR we can all cite, right, as a cause of burnout, and all this other good stuff. Okay, this was interesting to throw in there. This isn't actually the medical literature, but the Travis County Medical Society Foundation has made this available for free to anybody. It's a 132-page guide to develop a physician wellness program. If you use it for a nonprofit purpose, you can just have it. So if you want to put a physician wellness program in place, here's a place where you can start. Put together by Medical Foundation. This one, again, is not medical literature. This is in the financial planner literature. Financial planners like to call themselves, they're the equivalent of your physician for your finances. But I thought it was interesting because of this paragraph. It talked about how money is a significant source of stress in the lives of 3 out of 4 Americans, more important than work, health, children, and family. And also noted that chronic financial stress is associated with serious health, occupational, psychological, and relational problems. So good reason to pay attention to your finances. All right, this was a book. It was Medical Student Wellbeing. Some Yahoo authored a chapter in it for the for finances. So at least it's getting out there sometimes. I get asked to do a chapter in a book like this about once a year. I don't know how many people are actually reading them, but if they're given out, maybe we're getting it to medical students a little bit earlier. So if you get a chance to put a chapter in a book like that, please do. It's a little bit of work, but it's really helpful. Okay, this is Trevor's paper. He was nice enough to put my name on it. This is a burnout reduction and wellness strategy. This is basically a review article, basic personal finance for doctors. It was published in the radiation oncology literature. Not much to say about it other than it was a brief overview of personal finance for docs. So some conclusions. There's dramatically more literature than there was 2 years ago. So this is wonderful. I think that's great. There's far more interest and acceptance of a financial curriculum in both medical school and residency. It's still a tiny fraction, but there's way more interested in it. People are wanting to put these in place, so that's great. And I think there's a few positive findings in the trends on both physician burnout and physician finances. The most recent survey I saw actually showed a decrease in burnout, which is the first time in years that I've seen that. So I think we might be making some progress there. All right, here's my oldest. This is Whitney. This is what we like to do to encourage no burnout and lots of wellness. This is canyoneering in southern Utah, something we like to do a lot. And you can see why it's so fun, right? Just imagine traversing that terrain. But let's talk a little bit about the junction of personal finance and wellness. My premise is that financial literacy and financial planning decreases burnout, decreases suicide risk, increases career satisfaction, actually improves patient care, because doctors who can concentrate on the patient are better doctors. You can stick it to the man. You don't have to listen to the administrator. You can do what's right for the patient because your finances are in order. I truly believe that. I hope we can get more and more studies proving it. I think it's a difficult thing to prove in a scientific study, but deep down I believe it's true. So our work here is not making rich doctors. We're not making the rich richer. We're healing the healers. And there's obviously more to wellness than financial security, and we'll be talking about a lot of that this week. But financial insecurity certainly decreases wellness. I think I've demonstrated today with peer-reviewed literature. All right, 12 key principles I want you to leave this conference with. Let's go through them one by one. How much you earn actually matters, okay? Sometimes we don't talk about this, but it's far easier to build wealth on a higher income. And a lot of doctors are just accepting a low income when they could have a higher income. I've always been amazed by the difference in the range in a single specialty versus the range between specialties. Let me show you what I mean. Here's the average annual physician compensation thrown up there from a Medscape survey this year. And as you can see, you're right, the preventive medicine docs only make about $209,000. The orthopedists make about $482,000 on average. Okay, that's not a surprise. We've all seen these before, right? But if you just look at one specialty, this one comes from emergency medicine, look at the 10th percentile for compensation, it's 223, and the 90th, 460. I mean, that's about as big as a swing as between preventive medicine and orthopedics, and it's the same in every specialty. And so realize that if you're willing to be an owner and do a good job of running the business, if you will negotiate your contracts, there's really no reason to be taking a below average physician salary. Get a higher one. It makes everything easier. It's way easier to build wealth, to manage your debt, and to be a better doctor if you'll get a higher income. Okay, so keep that in mind. Sometimes we trade some things to get a lower income, and that's fine. Maybe we have less call or whatever. But keep that in mind, that this is something we need to put some attention to actually keeping your incomes up there. And it's huge variation between physicians that are doing the exact same job. All right, number 2. A high income is not wealth. Okay, we saw in your statistics that many of you have very high income, but not nearly as many have high wealth. So net worth is the measurement of your wealth, right? Everything you own minus everything you owe, not your income. It's all about converting that high income to a high net worth. Getting rich is not complicated. You make a lot of money, you don't spend a lot of money, you put your money to work as hard as you're doing, you invest it well, and you protect against loss. It's really not a complicated formula. And yet, nobody ever gave it to doctors. All right, point number 3. Financial literacy is rare, right? Our financial world is becoming increasingly complex. Your training pretty much totally failed you in this regard. But if you can acquire this combination of financial knowledge and financial discipline, that combination is so rare, it's like having a superpower. And you just stand around and you go, wow, nobody else gets this. This is like I can do whatever I want with my life because I've put these two things together. And it's really rare. I don't want it to be as rare, but it's wonderful that you're here and you're getting these things. You just can't win this game until you understand the rules. And you got to spend a little bit of time to understand the rules. Okay, number 4, managing is a team sport. Successful couples manage money together, right? I'm always saying one house, one spouse, one job. That doesn't always work out. But every time you change one, it's really expensive, right? So the fewer of each of those you can have, the better off you do. So if you have a partner, as 80% of you do, institute periodic meetings. I think about once a month is right, but heck, once a quarter is better than none, where you actually talk about money. One person's probably more interested than the other, but that's okay. You can update the other person about what's going on so they can carry on in the event something happens to you. But most importantly, you're getting on the same page. I mean, you don't even have to be on the same page as long as you're reading from the same book, right? But you got to do it together. If you don't do it together, it's really hard to be successful. Number 5, career longevity is critical, okay? If you can work for longer, making less money, that is way better than working for a shorter period of time and making more money. And there's a few reasons why. Your taxes are lower because of our progressive income tax. If you can spread those earnings out over more years, you end up with a higher Social Security benefit. You have more time for your investments to compound, so basically you have to save less. You can make less and you can save less and enjoy more of your money as you go along if we can keep you in the career. Like somebody told me recently, matching into an emergency medicine residency is like winning a $10 to $15 million lottery. All you got to do to collect the money is stay in the game for 30 years. And you win this by staying in the game. And that's why combating burnout is such a high priority among doctors. Number 6, there's really no substitute for insurance, right? Insurance is a losing bet on average, right? Because you pay this premium, and only some of that premium is paid back out to the policyholders as benefits, because something bad didn't happen to everybody, obviously. But the insurance company has to take some of that money and pay for their expenses, and some of that money for their profit, if they're not a mutual company. And so, on average, insurance is not a good deal. But you still need to insure against financial catastrophes, including disability, death, liability, valuable property, and health, right? So you got to get that in place. It's absolutely a critical component. That's why my boot camp book starts out, what's the first chapter? It's disability insurance. It's protecting your greatest asset. And then use your savings. Use your emergency fund for non-catastrophes, right? The classic things are like vacation insurance. What's a vacation? Well, it's just pissing away money for a good time. If you have to insure that, maybe you shouldn't be going on the trip, right? Same thing with insuring your consumer items. Every time you go to Best Buy, they want to sell you an insurance policy. And those are not great places to spend your insurance dollars. You're far off spending more money insuring against the big things. But if you don't have these critical policies in place, start there. Get them in place, okay? There are resident doctors who get disabled. There are lots of young doctors who didn't think anything could happen to them that had something bad happen. It happens all the time. Number 7, you can't ignore your debt, all right? Doctors become numb to their debt in medical school, and the vast majority of doctors are way too comfortable with debt. If you have less debt, you have better cash flow, and that gives you options. Not only can you spend less money on disability insurance, but you also don't have to use as much of your income to pay a mortgage, for instance, right? Think about it. Those of you with a mortgage, how many days a month or how many shifts a month or whatever are you working after tax just to pay that mortgage? It's probably 2 or 3. If you can get rid of that mortgage, you just freed up 3 days of your month. And so I think there's a lot of benefit there to paying off debt. But the most common question I get is, should I pay down debt or should I invest, right? And there's 2 components to it. There's the mathematical component. Yes, it's still a winning strategy to borrow at 2% and earn at 8%. Although there's not, there's a difference in the risk-adjusted returns there. But most importantly, there's a behavioral component. And I don't think we pay enough attention to the behavioral component. I think that we look at that and we go, it's only 2%, and then we decide not to pay it off. And instead we go buy a Tesla or whatever, right? We spend it on something we like. And the truth is, if you have any debt at all, you are not living a Spartan existence on rice and beans, you're basically financing whatever you're doing that's extra above that at whatever the interest rate of your debt is. And if you think about it that way, I think you'll avoid being debt numb and pay it down in a reasonable period of time. There is a high correlation between people with low debt and wealth. And I think that's because the same financial muscles, the same thing that drives these people, the same X factor that drives these people to save money and invest it and learn about this stuff also drives them to pay off their debt. And I think that's why. I don't think it's necessarily, a lot of them, when you talk to them about it, they almost feel guilty for having paid off their mortgage. It was only 3%, but I just didn't like it. But you know what? They also put more money than anybody else into their savings. And so that's why they were successful. Okay, number 8, get a plan. You need a written financial plan. If you can't write it yourself, then find another way to do it. Take my online course, go hire a financial planner, but get a plan. 90% of the questions I see on the White Coat Investor Facebook group should be answered by, what does your plan say? What does your plan say, right? And so it's a key component. First, list out your goals, then what accounts you're going to save for each goal in, then your asset allocation for that goal, and finally select investments to match that asset allocation. There are lots of reasonable plans, and any reasonable plan is fine as long as you fund it adequately. I generally recommend 20% of gross earnings for doctors toward retirement. If you will put that in there for your whole career, any reasonable plan is going to work. You have to take some risk, though. Okay? You cannot put all your money into CDs and whole life insurance and bonds and expect to have enough money to retire on. This is the greatest task of your life, saving up for retirement, financial task of your life. And so you got to fund it, you got to take it seriously, but you got to take a risk. Because if you only invest in those safer investments, you got to save 50% of your gross income for retirement. And we're just not willing to do that. So you got to take some risk. That means some money in stocks or real estate, those sorts of investments where you're taking on some risk. And then, of course, as we have been reminded in the last 2 weeks, most of us have lost 15% plus of our net worth in the last 2 weeks. You got to stay the course. It doesn't matter how good your plan is if you don't stick with it. A lot of people talk about, oh, well, I'm young and I can take, more risk. I'll be 100% stock or 90% stock. There's not a huge difference between being 75% stock and being 90% stock. But if one of them keeps you in the game in times like March 2020 that we're going to be talking about for years, if it keeps you in the game, you're way better off 60% stocks if you don't sell low. 3 of my partners in 2008 sold low, in their 50s. They basically cashed out in October or November of 2008. Happens all the time. Got to stay the course. Okay, number 9, get good advice at a fair price. All right, assume everybody in the financial services industry is there to make money from you, not for you. And that'll get you in the right mindset to interact with the financial services industry. Okay, your fees matter. And compounded fees matter a lot, right? Sometimes you have to pay more fees than other times, but realize that every time it's paid, it's coming from you and it's coming from your return. So know what you're paying and constantly be evaluating the cost of the advice or the service against the value received. But at the same time, don't be afraid to get good advice, right? If you need advice, go get the advice. It's far better off than doing things wrong. But there are so many sources now of good advice at a fair price that shouldn't be too hard to do if you pay at least a little bit of attention to it. Number 10, you got to be intentional about this stuff, okay? It takes time and effort to do this well. And they're all different tasks. It's a different set of skills to earn well, to save well, to invest well, and even to spend well. I'm not a very good spender. You ask my people, and they'll tell you that I just go out and buy stuff. I don't buy stuff very often, but when I do not shop it. I am not a good spender. That is my weakest thing. And then even giving well takes some effort. So realize that this has to be an intentional effort. Use that spending plan, aka budget, to align your time and money with what you value most. That's the idea behind it, right? Not to constrict you, but to provide you more options. So your money's going to what you care about most. And it's going to be different for everybody. For some people, it's going to be travel. For others, it's going to be a nice home or transportation or less time in the career or whatever. Make sure you're spending it on what you care about. Number 11, taxes. Okay? Taxes are a major budget item for doctors, especially as more of us become W-2 employees. We have fewer places to hide. If you will reduce them, you will improve your ability to build wealth. Doctors all think they pay too much in tax. Most of them do. But they think it's because they don't know the tricks. I only knew the tax tricks, or I had the right guy preparing my taxes, then I'd pay less in taxes. So they go around looking for little tricks to implement, and they go to their tax guy and try to find the right tax person that's going to save them money. When in reality, it's about doing what the government incentivizes you to do and understanding what their incentives are. What does the government want you to do? They want you to save for retirement. They want you to spend money on health care or savings for health care. They want you to have a big fat mortgage. They want you to give money to charity. They want you to get married, but only to somebody who doesn't make any money. They want you to have children. They want you to own a business. And frankly, they want you to earn less money because of our progressive tax system. Your taxes are lower if you make less money. So when you understand what they're incentivizing, you can better live your life in places where you're willing to do that. And those are the big things that save you money. The two biggest tax breaks for doctors are your tax-deferred retirement accounts, and if you're self-employed, if you can qualify for it, the 199A deduction that came out in the last 2 years. So anytime people are talking about those two things, if you want lower taxes, pay attention there. Those are the big rocks, the big pieces of the puzzle. Number 12, and I'll be talking a little bit about asset protection in my last conference, but your best asset protection is date night. Okay? You are far more likely to lose money to your spouse than you are to your patients. It's almost infinitesimal how many doctors actually lose personal assets, especially any significant amount of personal assets, to patients in lawsuits. It's really tiny small. We're all terrified of it, but it's a tiny percentage. And insurance is your first line of defense, so make sure you have liability insurance, both malpractice and personal liability, and realize that the likelihood of actually exceeding that first line of defense is really, really low. And even most protection beyond that is cheap and simple. So before you get into the complex, expensive asset protection techniques like overseas trusts, just calculate out what your risk really is and what the cost is going to be and make a wise decision in that regard. Okay, so after these talks, we're not going to do any Q&A in the rooms, but the speakers are going to drop their mic and they're going to go outside and answer questions. And so I'll take questions out there for the next few minutes. I only have a few because I got to be back in here and emceeing the next talk. But we're going to take a 10-minute break here, and then we'll come back with Sarah Catherine Gutierrez. So thank you for your attention. Let's work our way back into our seats here. We have a lot more breaks planned into the schedule than we did in Park City, but we'll try to run the conference mostly on time. I think the breaks will always allow us to catch up, so we'll be able to do that. That's important for those watching the live stream, but also, it's just part of doing what we said we're going to do. So let's get started here. Let's see. Yes, Sarah Catherine is in here. Good. We got our speaker. So our next talk is sponsored by Pattern Insurance. This one is not eligible for continuing medical education or dental CE, so we have a sponsor. At Pattern, we know that insurance is complicated. That's why we built our company around simplifying disability and life insurance for busy doctors so they feel confident they have the right policy and their income is protected. Through the years, thousands of doctors from all 50 states and medical specialties have trusted Pattern to give them unbiased information on all of their own occupation companies and help them make the best decision for their individual situation. We believe that as doctors make better decisions, lives are changed, including their own. And they'll be in the exhibit hall during the breaks. You can meet them if you are interested in getting, especially disability insurance in place. All right, Sarah Catherine Gutierrez is a friend of mine. I've been out to her home on a couple of occasions, and it is wonderful to see what she is doing. She is the founder of Aptus Financial. She holds an MPP from Harvard University and the CFP and CRPS designations. She founded Aptus in 2011, same year the White Coat Investor was founded, with a fixed fee, advice-only pricing model aimed at eliminating financial conflicts of interest. The Aptus team of planners now worked with hundreds of clients in over 40 states and have implemented over a dozen retirement plans with fixed fees and focused on financial wellness. She's married to Jorge, and they have 3 children, Marco, Max, and Lucia. Sarah Catherine, thank you for coming. Let's hear about exploring the tax-efficient waterfall. Incidentally, this was one of the most popular talks at the first White Coat Investor Conference, so I asked her to modify it a little bit and get her back up here again. So I hope you enjoy it.
Thank you. Okay, appreciate it. No pressure there. So I've got a goal for this year to try to be the best again. So thank you all for being in this room. I don't check the stock market. We'll start there. And we'll have a lot of fun today talking about what will matter on your money, which is not actually what the stock market does on a day-to-day basis. Okay, so first of all, what I want to start out with is the fact that this is really historic right now. And it's not historic for the coronavirus. It's not historic for the stock market and what it's doing. What is historic is that a blogger in 2011 set out to basically give physicians a fair shake on Wall Street. And what I would tell you right now is that every single person involved in the White Coat Network as a blogger or a consumer or an informal leader in this mass financial literacy, you're not just giving people a fair shake on Wall Street anymore. You are actually changing Wall Street, and we'll get to how. So if you think about 10 years ago or 15 years ago, if you had a room full of physicians like this and an advisor up here talking, they would be telling you something like, you just keep doing your day jobs and just give your money to me and just don't worry about it. You don't have time to think about it. This is not in your expertise. Let the experts do it. But how have the experts done? So as we saw from the previous slide deck with Dr. Dolly, 27% of physicians in their 60s don't even have $1 million yet. But I would hazard a guess that many of them have a financial advisor. And so I think as we are rolling through the first group of people who cannot retire right now but want to, this rising student loan crisis, the rising credit card crisis, this is what we have learned the hard way about the financial services industry. They have a loyalty to where they make money. And the loyalty is to your investments in a retirement account. But their job is not to help you retire. And that is a really fundamental difference. They're there to help you with your investments. Their responsibility is not to make sure that you can retire one day. And everyone in this room knows a physician who is still working well into their 70s who doesn't want to be doing that, right? Okay, so that is our biggest indicator that that is what is happening. So I want to give the good news, though. Let's just take 3 random people that have walked into our offices virtually. So we have a mid-career couple who wake up one day with a massive whole life policy and a lot of credit card debt. Both physicians. And a lot of kids, more kids than I can count. And so somewhere between bleary-eyed shifts and taking care of kids, they stumble on the White Coat Investor blog and start reading, whoa, we are really not doing what we're supposed to be doing. And within a 2-month period of time, they're able to completely turn things around, to figure out what to do to stop funding those whole life policies, to get out of credit card debt aggressively, and to get on the right savings rate so that they can one day be able to retire. Or what about the young couple still in residency who has $1.2 million in student loan debt? Could you imagine a world where you would have that much debt and not have the White Coat Investor blog? It's funny, I talk to a lot of med students now. It's really hard to find someone who hasn't heard of it. So then you think about the DIYer who's been DIYing his whole life and he's near retirement, but he's been doing it in a really lonely way. He's been trying to cobble together from this financial book that has some good wisdom but seems to be selling something else here, and random articles in places. And he's been able to cobble together his own DIY plan. And as he's nearing retirement, he's a little worried. What if he got it wrong? And then he stumbles into the White Coat Investor blog. And suddenly, he has found his tribe. So what we know now is that these physicians are 3 people, but there are 800 stories between here and the live cast, and anybody who's watching, who are all changing Wall Street fundamentally, because you guys are doing your own investing. You guys, for the most part, you're doing your own financial planning, and that is going to have a massive ripple effect. So does anybody think things have changed on Wall Street yet? Have we seen any change? Well, actually, we have. How many people have watched the expense ratio or the fees? How many of you have watched the fees on mutual funds? Where have they gone? Have they gone up or down? They're going down, and they're dropping really, really fast. And why are they dropping really, really fast? Competition. So it's all supply and demand. That's what sets pricing. And if a group of 800 wealthy physicians in a room and the tens of thousands of people out there who are not in this room look at the actively managed mutual market world and say, no thanks, I'll pass on my personal account, that is how you drive down the costs of mutual funds. We're also seeing costs aggressively go down in retirement accounts. So it's really interesting to me to see a flood of white coat readers who are going and joining their investment committees at their hospitals, at their clinics, and saying, hey, listen, if you have a 1% expense ratio on our fund options, and then the cost of the record keeper and the TPA, who are the ones that actually administer a retirement plan, plus the advisor who's in charge of picking out the fund list itself is 1%. That is a cumulative 2 percentage points. So if I'm a physician nearing retirement and I expect to have an average rate of return on my money of, say, 5%, you are giving away 40% of your return every year. Does anybody think that sounds like a good idea? No, we are seeing a major wealth transfer from the financial services world into hardworking middle-class America, and it is because of everybody here in this room. Because when you join an investment committee and you get fees reduced on your retirement plans from 2% to 0.5%, that is going to impact every single employee of that hospital, and it's going to keep more money in their pocket, which is more precious than ever in a retirement crisis. And that is how you are having a massive impact on Wall Street. So I can also tell you this. I started my company, as Dr. Dolly said, in 2011. And it was this basic idea. It was coming out of this housing crash that caused the 08-09, the housing crisis that caused the 08-09 crash. And I asked this simple question, like, where can people actually go to not buy a house, you know, to get advice on whether or not to buy a house that's non-conflicted, you know, someone that doesn't have financial skin in the game. And it was really hard to find people doing that. So I had this idea, what if you just ask people to write a check for your advice? Well, I thought it sounded like a great idea, that you could take someone, say, that had $1 million in assets, and they were paying $10,000 in a 1% management fee, and you could give them a plan for $1,500 that's a one-time thing. They take it, they run with it, and they get to save all those fees over time. Little did I know that apparently if $10,000 goes out of your account, just out the back end in fees, did y'all know that's not real money? So I didn't realize that. It's not real. So I never would have made it, because if people had to write a check for me with real money, and I was competing against people who were working for not real money, obviously this never would have worked. So when Dr. Dolly heard about what I was doing and what my team and I were doing, basically he started talking about us. He started educating people on fees. He started helping people be able to discern, you know, what's a fee that is worth paying for? What are you getting for that fee? Is it worth it? And so that is what I believe the only reason I'm staying, the only reason that it worked. I'm getting a little bit of the, can y'all still hear me okay? I'm getting some pauses. Okay. So what I want to do today is walk through the tax-efficient waterfall. And the reason this is important is because while we are seeing massive changes in mutual fund fees, in retirement plan fees, the one area we are not seeing a lot of change on is the financial advising industry. So the industry that's responsible for helping you figure out how much to save and where to put it. And so right now, at this time, I would say most people are better off going it alone than trying to hire someone randomly to do their money, because there are still major conflicts of interest with your money. So if you think about it, if you have someone who sells life insurance, which a lot of life insurance agents, you know, come after physicians because they can make a lot of money off you. If you want to have an aggressive repayment of, you know, 3 to 5 years on student loans, how excited do you think a guy selling insurance is going to be about you having that plan? Not very excited. Not at all excited. In fact, might kind of talk you out of it. So what you have to do is figure out how much you have to save, and then where to put that money in your buckets. And then that is how you're going to be able to create your own DIY financial plan. Okay, so one of my favorite things to do is to talk to fourth-year med students. And it's a really fun, hilarious exercise where I give them a scenario of a couple. And so she's a physician, makes $300,000, and so one income household, kids, all, you know, the whole thing, and then $300,000 in student loan debt. And we break up the room into 7 different groups, and each of them has a job, and that is to be able to figure out how much we're going to spend on one item, from a house to a car to whether we're going to do private school and all of that. And it's really fun because the exercise starts with lots of laughing and giggling. And so Dr. Turner and Dr. Mizell are the ones in the back there. I think you're going to be hearing from them in a bit. They're the ones that run these awesome programming for fourth-year med students, semester long. So anyway, they can testify to how funny it can be when you first get started. So we usually pick the house first, and they do something prudent. So they pick a house that's 2 times income when, you know, the lenders are willing to give them money at 4 times income. So that's a good decision. They choose a Prius, a used one, and only have a car payment of $400 a month. They send their kids to public school, and they decide to do something really prudent, like pay off their student loans in 5 years. And you can see by the time we get to the fourth group, it ain't funny anymore. People start to get real worried because they are patting themselves on the back for making great financial decisions, yet they run out of money. The lesson here is this. A financial plan is critical, but it's not complicated. This is a financial plan right here, just these numbers. And what it is it's the opposite of the way people make a financial plan right now, which is you make financial decisions that seem prudent, one at a time. All financial decisions, how much to save, where to put it, how fast to pay off the student loans, how much house to buy, it all has to be made at one time if you want to have a good financial plan, but it's addition and subtraction. Okay, this is the way most of us in the room were probably brought up. We were brought up in the good old American way, which is to stimulate the economy. And we can stimulate the economy by consuming first and then believing that somehow there'd be a little bit of money left over to save, right? So we have a consuming culture. So when we were taken to a car lot with our parents to go pick out a car, we thought that the process of buying a car was to pick out the interior, to smell the leather, to look at the new technology, to pick the safest car. But what we didn't feel the pain of was the payments that came after. The payments during those really lean months that made it super hard where we had to pull from savings. Same thing with buying a house. We picked a house based on how big the yard was, based on how many bedrooms it had, not based on what it was going to mean for us to have to make those payments months after months. Folks, I'm telling you, the simplest, most important thing you could ever do, more important than the tax-efficient waterfall, is to just pay yourself first. That's it. That, like, literally, we could just drop the mic and leave here if everybody could just pay themselves first and then spend the rest, right? Because the rest is real simple. Okay, in order to have the ability to pay yourself first and then be able to make sure your money works for you, you have to have a good financial plan. And so what I want to go through is the different ways that you can do a financial plan. So first of all, I believe that you can do a financial plan. And as Dr. Dolly said, the majority of people in this room are DIYing and should be DIYing. You are reading the books, you are listening to the podcasts, you are reading the blogs. You are more educated. So Dr. Dolly and I were talking on the way in, I'm still shaking up here. This is the toughest crowd I will ever be in front of talking about money, ever. And I'm sure I'm going to say a million different wrong things. And the deal is I would put you guys up against any financial advisor out there on your financial knowledge, many of you. So here's the thing, you should be doing your own financial plan. For the folks who don't necessarily want to do the financial plan, consider doing a financial planning course, and there's some great courses out there, like the Fire Your Financial Advisor course. Imagine if you can go do a course like this, you don't run the risk of running out and doing this really cool BDR, backdoor Roth, and then forgetting the pro rata principle, right? So you can do the Fire Your Financial Advisor course and simply make sure that nothing slips between the cracks. And the beauty of the financial industry, remember, we're trying to change it here, is that advisors like my company, like Aptus, are willing to let people pay a one-time fee to review your plan. So if you do a plan and you want to make sure you're doing it great, there are advisors who will spend 3 or 4 hours with you and make sure you've done it right. Okay, then let's say you really are nervous about doing your own financial plan. You can hire a fixed fee advisor to run your financial plan, teach you how to invest, and you run with it. We call that guided DIY. And that is also for people who want to do it but don't want to read the stuff, don't want to go through the course. That is also a very legitimate way of consuming financial advice in the industry. And finally, there is nothing wrong with turning over your money to an advisor. So there are people who are truly paralyzed by the thought of doing their own money. There are couples that have a lot of strife between them that make it really difficult to DIY a plan. And you know, while I do believe that we have pushed the industry forward in how we help people manage their own money, I do believe there will always be a place for advisors who take people's assets, give financial planning, and manage it for them. Okay, so here are the building blocks for your pay yourself first system. So you pay yourself first. Then, as Dr. Dahl, set aside money, lots of money. You can set aside money in different savings accounts to basically prepare for the unknown unknowns like emergencies and the known unknowns like repairing your roof. You know you're going to have to do it, you just don't know when. And if you can save along the way for those fluctuations, then what that allows you to do is have such a precise plan that you can know precisely how much money is left over on a monthly basis that is safe to average into the market, because we know perfectly averaging into the market is how you make sure you most efficiently get the gains in the market. Then we'll talk about this later. You pay your bills, but constantly reduce them. We know bills do not bring incremental happiness. And then, for the spenders among us, and I am one of you, it feels so good to spend everything in your account. It's like something in the brain that gets soothed, and you get to spend it all. And it's a fantastic feeling for some of us, terrifying for others. But this is where spenders and savers get to meet in harmony in a financial plan when you pay yourself first. Okay, hate having slides with so many numbers. So just think of this as like a reference for later. I will also mention that on the conference app, we have a couple resources for you where you can actually pencil through or use, for our Excel nerds in here, you can use an Excel spreadsheet to put together a rudimentary plan of your own. So that's available for you, and this is a reference point that you can use. So we know that pretty much if you save about 20% of your gross income as a high-earning physician, you'll probably be able to retire. But we can refine that number a little bit. And so if you want to be able to diagnose, are you on track for retirement? There are a ton of really cool apps out there where you can run your numbers. But this is just a little kind of rudimentary little grid that you can also use. And the way you would use it is this. You would figure out how many financial assets you have right now, and you would take your age, and you would line those up, and that is roughly probably what your savings rate ought to be. So let's say you get out of residency, you're 35, and you have nothing to your name. You would probably want to have more of a 25% savings rate than someone who is just 30 coming out of residency. Now, we believe that student loans are investments. I want you to stop thinking about student loans as debt. As we saw from the research before, it can have a paralyzing effect on you. And I want you to turn that around and realize that if you have 6.8% debt, when you pay that off, that 6.8% is like getting a rate of return on your money. And if you look at that as after-tax rate of return, you would have to have a guaranteed, federally backed rate of return of more than 8% to get a tax equivalent yield of 6.8%. And so look at your student loans in a different way. We're going to talk about those in a second. But here's how I want student loans to play into this grid. Let's say that you have about the number of student loans that you have in income. I would say that most of us want to slay that student loan debt within 5 years. And probably in order to do that, you're going to max out your retirement account that's maybe $19,500 for this year. You might max out an HSA, maybe max out a backdoor Roth, and we're going to go through those. But then the rest of your money is probably better off going to slay the student loan debt so that you can have it repaid in 5 years. But that means you're under saving for retirement likely. So what I would recommend you do is shift down your age by 5 years on this chart if you have about 1 times your pay in current student loans. So you can also fire yourself up and you can plan to retire, or what I like to say, just be work optional by the time you're 55. And you can see that is quite a feat, but a lot of people do it. I kind of put myself in this category and feel like I can live to tell about it, even as myself being a spender. So I highly recommend people taking a look at this and saying, could I pay myself first 35 or 40% to have the ability to live life on my own terms by the time I'm 55? Okay, so this brings us to the highlight of our day, which is the most exciting thing you've ever experienced in your life, the tax-efficient waterfall. Are y'all excited about this? Do we need to get some caffeine and some stretching? Okay, good, thank you. I have a clapper in the front row who promised me to clap every now and then. Okay, so here is what we're gonna do. We're gonna walk step by step through the places that I want you to prioritize those savings. So you've picked your savings rate, presumably, and on the conference app, if you pull that pay yourself first system, eventually what you're gonna do is plug in that percentage savings rate and then make it into a dollar figure, and then you can pull those dollars through these buckets as we go. Well, not right now, because you're probably gonna need to cozy up with that. I will be around at the conference and can walk anybody through it as they do it. Okay, so first of all, this is just a resource slide. So if you come back to the slides and you want to remember how much can I put into those accounts, we have a few of the popular ones in here so you can grab what the federal limits are for those accounts. Okay, so folks, here's the deal. It is amazing to me that there are people so paralyzed by student loan debt. We saw again in the research, this could not have been a better tee up for this talk, that there are so many physicians that have been talked out of their company retirement plans by people selling insurance, that they are literally walking away from what is sometimes a 100% immediate rate of return on their money. So I know at our local hospital and teaching hospital in Little Rock, they actually match your savings dollar for dollar up to 10%. Could you imagine anybody turning that deal down? It's incredible. A lot of hospitals have what's called a safe harbor match, where they'll match 100% up to 3% and then 50% on the next 2%. So they give you 4% immediately on whatever you put in. It's incredible. So do that first, okay? No matter what, of all the things, do that first. Now, there's one little technical detail that is worth mentioning and worth you guys taking the time to ask questions on. And that is the timing of how you put your money in, because it can affect how much you get in a match. So there is a mechanism that clinics can have called a true-up, where if you have large fluctuations in income and you go ahead and front load at the beginning of the year your $19,500, they have a way of settling out what percentage of what income level they ought to put in to match you. If there is no true-up, you could actually be leaving money on the table. And so that is the jargon that makes no sense to me, but there it is, true-up. You know, thank you, financial services industry, for yet more useless information. So there's the language you need to use when you go ask your HR department if they have this mechanism. And if you were putting money in, front-loading it maybe over the first 3 months or so to get your contributions in quickly, you might want to consider actually drawing those out over the course of a year to make sure that you can maximize the match. Okay, next, slay the credit card debt. So one of the first things we like to do with folks coming out of residency that have $50,000, $60,000 in credit card debt is pay it off. Okay, like get your match and then pay that credit card debt off as quickly as possible, because some of that credit card debt has 22, 23% interest rate. Okay, let's go to one of my favorite new accounts, which is a health savings account. Now, I know a lot of people here probably understand how to use an HSA, but I do want to go through this just in case there are folks that don't know this amazing retirement tool that the federal government unwittingly created when they came up with the idea for an HSA. First of all, a health savings account is not the same as an FSA, where if you don't use it, you lose it. That's a totally different deal. So make sure, first of all, that you can look at this one with fresh eyes. So the first thing I want to say about the HSA is don't make a decision on the HSA until you've made the right decision on your health insurance. So there are a lot of physicians who have the choice between a traditional, like a PPO plan, and a high deductible healthcare plan, so HDHP. So you first have to make the best financial decision, the best health decision for you and your family by choosing the right health insurance plan. Once you have chosen the right health insurance plan, let's say you opted for the high deductible healthcare plan that lowers premiums, you don't have any chronic illnesses that you worry about hitting the deductible every year, and so then you have the option to start a health savings account. And so what this does is it allows you to put pre-tax money into an account, and then as long as you use that money eventually at some point in your life on health expenses, then you don't pay any form of taxes on it when you withdraw it. You don't pay income taxes when you withdraw it, and you don't pay capital gains taxes when you withdraw it. Now, why would capital gains taxes even be a possibility? Well, it turns out that some enterprising companies decided, well, wait a minute, the HSA looks a little less like a health account and a little more like a retirement account. So why don't we allow people to deposit their money into an actual brokerage account called an HSA, grow that money over time, and then use it in retirement, where what is the number one cost in retirement, folks? It's healthcare. That's a pretty safe bet to lock up your money. But wait, there's more. You're not locking up your money. So if you were to pull this money after age 60 and not use it for health expenses, you just pay income taxes on it, which makes the HSA exactly like your IRA. It works exactly like your 403B. That's why a lot of people call an HSA a stealth IRA. Is that not the coolest account you've ever heard? Like, I can't believe people aren't like jumping up and down and dancing on the tables. It's a cool account, which is why it is before our next one, which is to max out the retirement plan. Now, you've gotten your match, you've gotten out of debt, you've maxed out your HSA and invested it in stocks and bonds, and now you go back to your retirement plan and you fill that bucket as much as you can. And there are lots of different ways you can have a retirement plan. So we've seen amazing retirement plans that you can put, like the same hospital I was talking about earlier, you can actually max out a 403B and a qualified pre-tax 457 plan that works just like the 403B. So you can double up how much money you can put in those. There are still practices out there that have cash balance pension plans that can be a great deal, and they're pretty flexible. You can roll them over after you're done into an IRA. We really love those. This is the place to put those down and be able to max out and save those precious tax dollars and grow your money faster. Okay, next is our awesome, super fun backdoor Roth that I'm sure everybody in this room is doing, but anyone who hasn't ventured out into those, what you're doing is you're basically funding an IRA, and you are just not taking a tax deduction on it at tax time, which then makes it called a non-deductible IRA. You could presumably just keep it in a non-deductible IRA. I wouldn't do that, because then when it grows over time, you eventually have to pay income taxes on the gains. You'd be better off in a brokerage account where you put after-tax money in, and then you just pay capital gains taxes at the end. So we don't recommend opening up an IRA, funding it, and then doing nothing with it. Instead, what you can do is you can immediately, or a couple days later, convert that money into a Roth. The Congress still has not shut down the opportunity for you to convert IRAs to a Roth IRA, It is, of course, a non-tax transition because you did not pay taxes in the first place to put the money into the IRA. Okay, next, we highly recommend not being scared of a taxable brokerage account. Taxable brokerage accounts are just fine, and they can be pretty darn tax efficient as well. If you think about it, if you put your money in a pretty simple portfolio and you grow it over time, and there's money in there that you don't spend, it gets to get a step up in basis. You get to, when you pass away, that money, actually, the basis of what it's saying you pay is where the funds that make up that account, it's where they are trading at that point in time. It's called a step up in basis. So we love taxable brokerage accounts and highly recommend taking advantage of those. And that's going to be a big topic of discussion as you go. So we also love investing in alternatives, and they have a place in the tax-efficient waterfall. So there are folks who are really into real estate. There is a place for that. It's non-diversified. It can be risky, but there are folks who are figuring out how to do this in a less and less risky way. Some of you might have non-qualified deferred comp plans, and depending on where you work and the fiscal health of it, you might want to take advantage of those. They're just not nearly as glamorous or as fun, dance on the table worthy as your retirement plan or your HSA. And finally, there is no problem paying off your house. That is okay too. And for folks who are worried or folks who want to be financially independent at a pretty early age, there is nothing wrong with having your house paid off by the time you're 55 and being able to put extra payments towards that. Okay, student loans. I see some twitching happening in the crowd. So here's the thing. We know we have to pay our student loans. Okay? So the best thing we can do is to face them. The worst thing we can do is bury our heads in the sand. I have never seen anyone accidentally do well with their student loans. It takes work, folks. There's two different things that we tend to see. There's lots of different ways to repay your loans, but I can just shrink them down because 90% of people are going to do one of two things with their student loans. First of all, they're going to get into the public student loan forgiveness program. I'm not going to go into the details of these because you will be nerding out on student loans later, but most of you probably know what it is anyway. And where the public student loan forgiveness payments go in, and into the tax-efficient waterfall, is they win, okay? Because think about it. If you are going to have $50,000, $75,000, $100,000 forgiven tax-free of your student loans, that's probably better than anything you can get on that tax-efficient waterfall. So at all costs, you make whatever the payment is, you make that payment first. Now, the refinancing is super cool. So when you do this financial plan together, and you basically say, here's what I can pay myself first with, and here are the primary buckets I know have to go in for retirement. I know I need to get some tax relief. Every pre-tax option available, and then we'll go ahead and throw in that backdoor Roth, because that's pretty cool too. I know the dollar amount I have available to pay on my student loans. And why is that so important? Why is that important? Because you now get to go to the refi guys and you know exactly how much you can afford to repay. And so whereas before you might have said, hey, let's go get a 10-year student loan repayment because I'm not really sure, I just want to have it be a flexible tool, and you can reduce your interest rate from 6.8 to 5.2%, what if that number on the form says you can afford to pay these off in 3 or 4 years, and then you get the benefit of a much lower interest rate because you have done a financial plan and you know exactly how much you can afford to pay on your student loans. Okay, so I wanted to point out a few other things, and this is really because I want to drive home the fact that these different types of accounts are not usually brought up in a traditional financial planning relationship, because these are accounts that are not obvious but could be really good deals for you. But if you do them, they will not make money they will not make money for a traditional financial advisor who sells things or charges a percentage of assets, because these are assets you can't charge on. But they're worth you knowing so that you can take advantage of them in case they're available to you. So one of them that I think is really cool, and it's getting cooler than ever, is Mega Backdoor Roth. Right? Okay, yeah, okay, I saw a few thumbs up. Okay, wow, tough crowd. So I just thought we'd see some people passing out by now. So the Mega Backdoor Roth is super cool. And hospitals are starting to realize that physicians think they're cool. Again, a direct impact from White Coat Network, from people reading about them. So I just found a hospital in North Carolina through a client who allows you to max out your retirement plan, the pre-tax options, and then anything beyond that and the hospital match up to the federal maximum is allowed in after-tax contributions. And then through Fidelity, they allow you to, within the retirement plan, quarterly roll out that after-tax money, remember, just like that non-deductible IRA, into an actual IRA, convert it to a Roth, still managed with Fidelity, and invest it right there. How easy is that? How cool is that? You get more tax diversification here. So money, pay taxes on the front end, and then you get to grow it over time, never pay taxes again. It's just a brilliant option for folks. So when you're asking about that true up on the match, make sure to ask if you are allowed to do after-tax contributions. And this is not to be confused with the Roth option. This is after I've maxed out my $19,500 into a pre-tax account, can I make additional contributions after tax? And then that's what you could then use to potentially do backdoor Roths with. So some of you will have, as I said before, non-qualified deferred comp plans, and no plan is the same. You need to realize that those can sometimes be considered the assets of where you work, so you want to make sure that where you work, that you've seen the financials probably, you do that, but can be a great source of tax deferral. It's not as great as your retirement plan, because when you terminate from service, they could dump all that money on you. And it is taxed at your marginal income tax rate on top of the income that you're getting taxed on doing your job. So that could be hugely problematic. What you want to look for with non-qualified deferred comp plans is to make sure that you can stretch out those payments over as long a period as time, or some that allow you to take those payments at certain points, not right after you're separated from service. You can start them at age 60, you can start them at age 65, you can take them over 10 years. So you want to ask these questions to make sure that you don't end up in a worse tax situation than when you started. And then there's a lot of other ones that we've been seeing that are clearly coming through here. A lot of physicians are married to people in corporate America who have these restricted stock options, who have employee stock option plans. And so you've got to also be able to evaluate those pretty well to see if that makes more sense than just going directly to brokerage accounts. Okay, so really quickly, I just want to sum up investing. You're going to nerd out on investing here in just a second. And let me just check the time, because I do want to make sure that we are staying on course. I had to move this. Okay. So we believe that everyone needs to invest in an age-appropriate, risk-neutral, diversified portfolio that is basically your age to retirement, and capture the broad market returns and minimizing fees and taxes as much as possible. And so our investment strategy recommendation, after you've figured out all your buckets, is first of all, dollar cost average. First of all, you want to make sure that you have the maximum amount of cash available as early as possible to put into the market. And so what a financial plan does, cannot emphasize this more, is you figure out what that number is that you can afford so that you can be putting the money in. The most common thing we see, and this is particularly with female physicians, is we see piling of cash. Piling of cash. So I had this one that I was talking to weeks ago who had sat out through, who had gathered up cash all along the way, all through 2019. Was that a good plan or a bad plan? Yeah, not a great plan, right? Because we had a really nice 2019. And 2 weeks ago, she said, okay, I'm ready. I'm going to put my money in the market. And I said to her, the market is going to crash. The moment you put that money in, the stock market is going to crash more than 20%. And she called me and she said, oh my God, do you have ESP? Are you a prognosticator? And I said, no, I tell that to every single client before they put in a load of cash. Your money is going to drop right after you put this cash in 20%. But I nailed it on this one, folks. Okay, after that, once you figure out how to efficiently get your money into the market, so you capture up markets, you capture down markets, you capture the whole thing, then you invest simply and affordably in index funds, which you're going to talk about here in the next session, and don't discount target date funds. They are a little bit more expensive, but they are very efficient. They are very good at taking you and your cohort of people, and they make a little veggie soup out of stocks and bonds that are appropriate for your time to retirement and everybody within 5 years of your age who plans to retire at 65. Or you can choose a different year if you plan on retiring early. They are great tools. Don't discount them. They are not a lazy option. Okay, so how do you mix them all together in what we call asset allocation? So I don't understand why anyone would pick their own asset allocation, would actually think through it and do homework on it and then decide for themselves their asset allocation. I don't know why. Because some of the smartest people, Ivy League trained, the smartest people in the universe are actually showing us their homework. And they are telling us what they think after doing all their day job work to figure out asset allocation. They are actually telling you what you should be. And there are 50 major ones out there. And they are target date retirement funds that you can find all of them. And Morningstar compiles them up so we can see what average asset allocations should be. And we take guidance from those. We think you can too. Okay. So a lot has happened since Monday. I thought this was going to be the shocking chart to put in, but I had to turn in my slides a little too early. So how do you deal with volatility? Okay, so first of all, you have to buckle your seatbelt. Because if you look, if anybody says to me, 0809 was terrible, they did nothing. What did they do in 0809? They sold. Anybody else who made it through, employed, and contributing in the market came out way ahead. Here's what happens in our brains. First of all, our brains dislike money going down more than it likes money going up. And that is a terrible, terrible piece of our brain. And we have to constantly chatter back to it. That doesn't make sense. That doesn't make sense. We expect our money to go up more than it goes down, right? Otherwise, we would not invest. Second of all, you are getting paid for what the stock market is doing today. Did you know that? You get paid to take on risk. That is what investing fundamentally is. If you didn't have to go through what's going on today, then you would not get to grow your money so fast. And if you didn't grow your money so fast, you would have to have something more, like instead of a 20% savings rate, more like a 40% savings rate, okay? We get paid to live through, as hard as it is, what is happening today. And finally, the other thing we say to ourselves is this time is different. All those other market crashes didn't have coronavirus. And every single time we have gone through one of these downturns, there's been something different that says this time the market is going to go down and it's never going to come back up. But let me tell you, if you sell because of that, then you need to go buy guns and buy gold and get a cabin in the woods, because things are going to be a lot worse than the stock market. And you need to always understand that we have a self-healing economy. That's why we don't buy individual stocks. Individual companies can go away, but then they get replaced by another one. You just need to realize that our economy is built to recover, and we have to trust in that, and we have to trust fundamentally in the future of our economy. Are we done? Okay, are we tired? Okay, thank you. Okay, so really quickly, this is the rest of the plan. You start savings accounts, which prevent you from having to go into your brokerage account, from taking loans from your retirement plan, and help you have a little fun in your life, like traveling. Here are some of the common savings accounts that our physicians will start, and they fund them automatically. They don't make decisions on it. They just say, hey, bank, can you please transfer $150 a month into my car reserve, or $1,100 a month into my travel reserve? And then you go take the trip, put it on a credit card, and pay it back with the savings account, okay? That's the best way for you to control and manage your money. From there, automate your bills. You should not be making a decision on whether you're going to pay your mortgage this month. Is that a decision? No, so don't make it a decision. Have it paid automatically, and then you can review all of your bills on a quarterly or semi-annual basis with the constant goal of eliminating or reducing bills, because it has been studied and proven that bills, no matter what they're paying for, do not bring incremental happiness over time, no matter what the commercials try to tell us. Then you get to spend the rest safely. So whatever is left in the account, you spend it. If you use a credit card, just make sure you don't carry a balance month to month. That means that you are not going over on your budget. So you've paid yourself first, you're protecting against that repair, you're paying all your bills on time, automated, and then you're safely spending the rest. Okay, finally, Dr. Dolly referred to this, and I cannot agree with it more. But you can be here alone, and you can have the perfect financial plan. But if you come back home and you try to give that plan to a spouse, it can go very, very wrong, because a second person has to have a place in your retirement plan. So the places where we see conflict are where you choose a savings rate. You have one person in the couple wants to live for today. The other person in the couple is really worried about Armageddon in the future. How do you bring them together? They have to come up with a mutual savings rate. Sometimes you need that brokered by a professional. And by the way, you'll see in these slides, we have blogs that accompany a lot of these slides. I highly recommend you seeing us delve further in these issues. With investing, you're a physician and your spouse is like, why am I trusting you to invest our money? So a lot of females especially, we are risk averse when it comes to investing. It's been studied. We have a harder time with it. And so this is where you need a lot of care, a lot of preparation, a lot of research to make sure both people are on board, and that one person doesn't pull it too risky and one person in the couple doesn't try to keep everything in cash out of fear. But where we see emotional difficulty and where we know that finances can be a very large source of conflict and lead to divorce is on the spending side. And so we believe a good cash flow management plan, just like the one we laid out here today, that takes into account spenders and savers, and most of the time, that's what attracts folks. Bringing together spenders and savers so that you don't have a spender in charge and the saver is accommodating but feeling bitter about it, and you don't have the saver in charge and being able to tell the spender, no, you're not going to go spend that. You're not going to go spend that. I would not take kindly to that. So we believe that you really need to have, even if you're the one excited to nerd out in this financial plan, you have to bring in your spouse on the plan. Okay, I think I'm done. And I'm going to run outside and hang out, and I'm being approached. I didn't have bodyguards escort me out for going over, so I'm assuming I did well on time. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to take a half-hour caffeine break. There are drinks in this room right across the hall here. It's all set up. That's where the vendors are as well. You can meet them and grab a drink and take a break. And you'll notice in the back of each room there is a hand sanitizer. Please use it, okay, or use the personal bottles I asked you each to bring. Keep a little social distance, maybe one more step between than you usually would when talking to people, but you don't have to be totally asocial, all right? There is a book swap back there as well. So the way we're doing this, today the rules are you swap a book, okay? So if you take one, you got to leave one. Tomorrow the rules are you just take one book if you want, and Saturday you can take all the books that are there, okay? I don't want to take them home.
Two. Okay, 1, 2. 1, 2. A. RF2. RF2. I'm gonna walk up there and see their dropouts. RF2. 1, 2. 2, 1, 2. 2, 2, 2, 3. 3, 3, 4, 4. 4, 5, hey, 1, 2, 2, 2, 3, 3, 3, 4, 4, 4, 5, hey, 1, 1, 2, 2, 3, 3, 4, 4, 5, hey, 1, 2, 1, 2, 2, 3, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2. 2, 1, 2, hey, yep, 3, 4, 5.
1, 2, 3, 4, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Let's find our way back to our seats in here. We're going to get started again. I doubt they can hear me back there in the caffeine room, but maybe they'll see the impression when people start running out of the hallway. Did Brett give you a packet? All right, let's get started. Welcome back. Hope you had a chance to visit with some people and refill the caffeine there, drug of choice. We're looking for some performance-enhancing drugs for you this morning. Our next talk is sponsored by Splash Financial. Splash Financial is a student loan refinancing company that negotiates with banks and credit unions to offer market-leading low rates. Their first loans were designed specifically for physicians, and they offer a cash bonus to members of the white coat investor community who refinance with them. You can get a quote with them in 3 minutes using a soft credit pull at splashfinancial.com/WCI. It's a pleasure to introduce our next speaker, and both to you sitting here in the audience as well as those of you on the live stream. By the way, there have been over 400 of you check in here at the conference, and there are 230 more watching the live stream this morning. And so there's a lot of people watching this. It's not quite everybody who registered for it, but it's the vast majority. So it's great to have you all here no matter how you're watching. But our next speaker is Rick Ferri. He has over 30 years of experience in the advisor industry. He started out as a Wall Street broker, as he'll probably tell you, one of the bad guys in the industry, in 1989. Founded one of the nation's first low-fee portfolio management companies in 1999. Sold the firm in 2017, and today helps do-it-yourself investors simplify their portfolios for a fixed hourly fee. Rick has published extensively on the benefits of low-cost investing, including several books, like a dozen. He is also the creator and host of the Bogleheads on Investing podcast, which you may have heard. I was on it recently. But more importantly, it's a pleasure to bring Rick here because one of the best parts about this conference is I get to go to the people who made a big impact on my financial life and bring them out here and introduce them to you, give them a little bit of money, and really, profoundly amplify the message that they've been giving. And so, at the last conference, I had some people that were really important to me, like Jonathan Clements and Bill Bernstein and Mike Piper. At this conference, one of the people that I wanted to put in front of you is Rick Ferri. And his books had a huge impact on me, on my asset allocation, and the way I invest. And so it's wonderful to have him here in person, and it's going to be a real treat for you guys to hear from him. I've asked him to say a few words at the beginning about today's and this week's markets, which I think you'll enjoy. But the rest of his talk is also excellent. Excellent, excellent. So let's give a big round of applause for Rick Ferri, CFA.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you. It's really a pleasure to be here. I've known Jim for many years. I met him first in Dallas at a Boglehead meeting back when he was still in the Air Force, actually. And I remember then he was talking about starting, he had already had the White Coat Investor, I believe, was getting going, and he was thinking about writing a book, and we talked about that. So I had him on my Bogleheads on Investing podcast. He's the most recent guest, so if you'd like to hear that, it's about an hour long. You could listen to the Bogleheads on Investing. Before I begin my presentation, I thought it would be appropriate to talk a little bit about the market, because if you don't know what's going on in the stock market, I give you a lot of credit, okay? You're doing the right thing by ignoring it. But I just want to give you a little bit of a perspective of how things get priced, how the market prices securities and how the market gets priced itself, because a lot of people would say the market is crazy, it makes no sense, stocks can go to zero, and you hear all of this ideas of, wrong ideas, quite frankly, about how stocks get priced. So I'm going to give you the nickel version of valuation, okay? And here's how it goes, the nickel version. So there is a numerator and there is a denominator. And this is how everything gets priced. The numerator is future cash flows. And it doesn't matter if we're talking about stocks, we're talking about private companies, we're talking about the valuation of your practices, we're talking about real estate, we're talking about bonds, it doesn't matter. The numerator is future cash flows. Now we know where we are today. We know what the earnings of the market is today. We know what your practices are earning today. What somebody's willing to pay for that is going to be based on future, where we are today, and future cash flows going out. Now, the denominator into that number is risk, or better put, uncertainty. It's the uncertainty of those future cash flows. Okay? So, what happens if the future cash flows, the projection of future cash flows comes down a little bit? If the projection of future cash flows, future earnings, come down a little bit because it looks like we're going into a global recession and corporations are not going to be able to earn as much money as people thought, then the numerator gets smaller. But in addition to that, the denominator, or the uncertainty factor, starts to rise. And we have a situation now where there's a lot of uncertainty out there about this virus and what effect it's going to have on the earnings of companies and future cash flows. And that uncertainty, unfortunately, is getting larger. So as the denominator gets larger and the numerator gets smaller, what happens to the number, which is price? It drops, and it drops rather quickly. That's what's going on in the stock market right now. Earnings, future earning cash flows are being dropped by analysts on Wall Street and GDP and all around the world. So that's not good for stock prices. But on top of that, the uncertainty about how long this is going to last and how deep it's going to be is growing. Bigger number at the bottom, smaller number at the top, price of stocks comes down. It's a leveraged equation. Let's give you a couple of examples. Let's start out with, where are we? Yeah, let's start out with 9/11. 9/11, it occurred because of a war, or the prospect that we were going to have a war. All of a sudden, what's this going to do to the global economy? What's it going to do to future earnings? The expectation of future earnings drops. The uncertainty about the war and how long it's going to last grows. Stock prices fall to some level, and then at some level the uncertainty stops. In other words, it starts to reverse and you become a little bit more clearer about what's going to happen, and then the price of stocks recover. Because you can see those earning streams now have less uncertainty. Let's look at another example. That is 2007, the subprime loan crisis, bank crisis, if you will. It was a financial crisis. So we had a war, which was a geopolitical crisis. Now, 2007, 2009 is a financial crisis, but the same thing. Banks start having problems. People start defaulting. The earning streams of companies, again, get discounted. The uncertainty of how deep this is going to get grows, especially when Lehman Brothers goes bankrupt and the government doesn't do anything about it. Boom, and then boom, 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 until it stabilizes. And the uncertainty stabilizes. We begin to see light at the end of the tunnel, if you will. The uncertainty starts to come back in. The price of stocks recover. And here we are again, only this time the crisis is a health crisis. Probably a little bit more difficult because most of us, really haven't seen this type of thing before. So we've seen financial crises before, we've seen wars before, but a health crisis is something new. So a lot of uncertainty about that earnings stream, a lot of uncertainty about how far this is going to go. So we're seeing boom, 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 as that denominator gets bigger, as the numerator gets smaller. When is it going to stop? I don't know. I mean, if we look at China, we can always see that they've already seemed to have contained it. I'm not a health expert. That will probably eventually, the rest of the world will figure it out in sometimes radical ways. But then once it kind of gets figured out and the number of cases are actually known and start to drop and the containment and all that other stuff that needs to happen, now the earnings stream becomes more certain. The uncertainty starts to shrink. The market recovers. When's that going to be? I can't tell you. I don't know. But this is what's going on. So I just wanted to give you an idea of how things get priced. Okay. I hope that was helpful. Oh, by the way, one more thing. There's a speculative thing in here. When people become certain that the earnings are not only going to be good, but maybe a little too high, and that the riskiness or the uncertainty out there about that earning stream becomes pretty tight and like, oh, no, it's going to happen. Sometimes there's a speculative premium that occurs in the market, and the stocks get over 20 times earnings. And we actually, a few weeks ago, we were trading at about 21 times earnings. Today, we're trading at 16 times trailing 12-month S&P earnings. Historically, over the last 70 years, the average, if you take the straight average of all the PEs, which is simply the price of stocks divided by the earnings, the average is 16. So right now, today, we are trading at 16 times earnings, which is the average over a 70-year period of time. So what I say is, if you believe that if you invest in stocks and you believe that 10 years from now when you start selling stocks, or 20 years or 30 years, or maybe you never sell stocks, if you believe that the market is going to trade at the average earnings of 16 in the future, you're going to get the return of the market. You're going to get the return of dividends, you're going to get the return of inflation, you're going to get the return of GDP growth. Okay, my number on that is about 6%, but it's been that way even before the crisis began. So okay, now I can get into the education of an index investor. So here we go. Jim talked about my career. I was a Marine Corps fighter pilot, and I actually retired from the Marine Corps Reserves when I got out of college in 1980. And I've been a financial advisor since 1989, right after the crash on Wall Street. Oh, by the way, let's talk about the crash for a sec. 1987, the market crashed. Can anybody tell me how bad the return of stocks were in 1987? How bad was the return of stocks for the entire year? Can anybody yell out the number? Say what? Up? Oh, you mean the market was up? Yes, the stock market in 1987 was up 5.1%. But what happened was at the beginning of the year, it goes up like a parabola, and then it comes crashing down, and at the end of the year, you're still up 5%. That kind of looks familiar to where we are now, does it not? We were up 30% last year, and we were up 13% this year before the market decided to come down. We are at the level right now with stocks where we started the beginning of 2019. Well, actually, today it might be a little bit before then. But my point is that you get these parabolas that go up, and everybody looks at it and goes, this is my money. I'm owed this money. This is mine. And now you just took it away from me. This is terrible. But in fact, when you look at it, most of you have had most of your money in stocks. If you've been investing for 10 years, most of your money is in at a lower price than it is now. So just keep that in mind, too. Okay. So I wrote a bunch of books. I write for Forbes. Oh, there's an article on Forbes. Go to Rick Ferri, Forbes, and the 2 articles I wrote in the last week have some information in there that's going to be of interest to you because it has the actual mutual funds that I'm going to be talking about today are in those articles. So Rick Ferri, Forbes, you'll see the 2 articles. One of them is on tax loss harvesting, and the other is on how to make